Hi folks, and welcome to my series about how to play the bass. In this segment I'm going to discuss some things and give some pointers for what you should do before you rent an instrument. And I'm going to assume here that many people watching this will be renting an instrument in a school orchestra setting through one of the recommended rental companies that your school will give you a list of. Now, hopefully the instrument will come in a case that looks similar to this one. I like very much my case that was made by Moradian company in Boston. Another maker is called Cushy, or many rental instruments come in cases with much less padding. This one has a very thick padding inside. If you get a case with less padding, of course, you have to be more careful in transporting the instrument that you don't hit it against anything. And the case should have a bow holder in it. Some cases have bow holders on the neck. As I'm unpacking an instrument in such a case, I strongly recommend, in fact I insist, that students take the bow out first and put it somewhere safe, preferably not a music stand because those have a tendency to get knocked over, but sometimes there is no other option. So if you're going to put it on a music stand, be very careful. Take the bow out first, because once you take the instrument out, the case can get folded up and bows can get damaged. And that happens every day. Now, rental companies have insurance specifically for that reason. So if it happens, but let's try to avoid it. So once you take the instrument, or once you take the bow out of the case, and in fact I'll demonstrate this in reverse order. I'm going to put the end pin in before I pack up my bass. Now I intended to demonstrate unpacking, and I'll demonstrate packing it first. Now this case is well designed for being able to pack it relatively easily. Some cases zip down the middle, and those are much more difficult. But this one, as you saw, I hang it over the top of the scroll, and then I zip it here. Then I gently put the instrument down and continue zipping it around here. Now, my bows are sitting here in my bow case. I have a separate double bow case that I can put my bows in. I keep my good German bow in a silk tie. Supposedly silk slows down the rate of temperature and humidity change. I think probably most of the benefit is in my head, but that's still a benefit. And yeah, as I said, I have a double bow case. If you don't have a hard bow case, I recommend getting one, but rental companies usually don't give them. So if you don't have a hard bow case, just be very careful. And as I said, when you take the instrument out of the case, take the bow out first, put it somewhere safe, then take the instrument out. Now, when you're packing up the bass, of course, conversely, pack up the instrument first, leave your bow somewhere safe, then put the bow in the case, but don't forget to put the bow in the case. I have done this where I've packed up the bass, left my bow somewhere safe, gone on with my day, and realized that my bow is somewhere else. So remember to put the bow in the case, but do it after you've packed up the instrument. Now, I'm going to unpack my bass. And again, as you pick it up, be very careful, be mindful of other things, other instruments, furniture, people, music stands around you, and don't hit the scroll against it. Now, when you go to rent a bass, if you are going to the store or showroom of the rental company to pick it up, you should unpack it before you leave to assess it, to look at it, to make sure that, of course, look for signs of damage. Look all the way from the scroll down here. Many instruments have cracks in them that have been repaired, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. It happens to all these instruments, and there are people who work magical wonders with wood and repair it so that it functions and even looks sometimes as good as new. But if you're renting an instrument, it is good to take an assessment of it beforehand so that you know where the old damages are, and maybe even make a list so that when you go to turn in the rental instrument, the company can't say, oh, this wasn't this way before. Just know the condition of the instrument before you walk out the door with it. Now, if you are in a situation where the instrument is being delivered to the school by the rental company, then take your assessment as soon as you reasonably can. Now, of course, the instrument should have 4 strings. You should have a bridge. The strings should be not too high and not too low in relation to the fingerboard. Now, of course, that's a very subjective statement. Ideally, the G string should be about 6 millimeters above the fingerboard, and the E string, the lowest string, should be about 9 millimeters above the fingerboard. Much lower than that, closer to the fingerboard, and the strings will buzz against the fingerboard. Much higher than that, and it'll be unnecessarily difficult to press them down. Now, I recommend that you lean the instrument back like this, carefully, and look down the fingerboard to see that the fingerboard is centered, or that the bridge is centered in relation to the fingerboard. And if it's not, you should ask the rental company to fix it. And now, again, also look at the bridge. Over time, many bridges get warped down this way with the pressure of the strings on the top. A little bit of that is maybe not so terrible, but ideally the bottom part of the bridge should be perfectly flat and at a perfect 90-degree angle to the top of the instrument. Now, again, look at the entire back, look at all of the shoulders and the C-bouts and the hips. Sometimes these are referred to as the hips of the instrument. And take note of any cracks or scratches or scrapes. Now, the 4 strings should, on most rental instruments, should be the same kind of string. I like D'Addario Helicore strings, either the medium gauge orchestral or the hybrid version can be okay. Now, how do you know which strings you have? You look at the color of the thread at the bottom where the strings are attached to the tailpiece. Now, my strings that I have on this, you can see the black and white thread on the top 3 are Kaplan strings, and the bottom is a Spiracore. Now, of course, this goes against what I said about all 4 strings should be the same. On rental instruments, I recommend it. Now, I would be skeptical if you see a rental instrument that has 4 different kinds of strings, and especially if you look at the threads, if they're worn here, that means the strings are probably old, and look at the strings as they go across the fingerboard, and if you see that the strings are worn there, a little bit is okay, but if they're severely worn, you might ask the rental company to change them. I can change my own strings, but for beginners and families of beginners, I highly recommend, especially if you're renting an instrument, that you allow the rental company to take care of that. One more pointer that I can give. In your assessment, you should see that the end pin, number one, that the thumb screw on the end pin, this part, can be easily tightened and loosened, and that you can pull the end pin out and push it in easily. Now, many rental instruments will have a lock at the end of the end pin to keep it in the instrument so that absent-minded students don't take it out and lose it or use it as a weapon. And that's okay, but you should be able to take the end pin out and lengthen it and shorten it as you need to. Now, there are many options of sizes for instruments, and I would find it difficult to make a statement of, a student of this age should play this size instrument, and that at this age they should trade it in, because everybody's size and body shape is different. But definitely ask your teacher, and as you grow, the nice thing about rental instruments is that you can return them to the rental company, and they will allow you to trade it for a larger instrument as you grow. And you will notice that with smaller instruments, the sound is smaller and a little more nasal, and as you grow and grow into larger instruments, the sound becomes bigger and more projecting and more satisfying. I've often had students go from a quarter size bass to a half size and suddenly gain interest in playing because the instrument is that much bigger and the sound is that much more satisfying. Now, don't stretch yourself to play a 3/4 size bass when you are 9 years old and your hands are small. But do be aware that rental companies will allow you and even encourage you to trade your quarter size for a half size and your half size for a 3/4 size.